to come to an informal board leaders meeting for that political debate to happen at that level. Is that what you're anticipating, Lara?
I would anticipate probably the members here would want to have an informal conversation about it first, but I will take Councillor Dupre's advice on this one.
If I can come back, I think there's an issue around the work on the locally defined contributions and how that all plays out, and we want to have a discussion here, I think, about that rather than just punting it up to board without having a chance to consider that. That was one of the key issues that was going to inform how we phrased that.
Okay, so Judith, can we somehow timetable in that sort of informal political discussion at this level before finding a mechanism to escalate it up to board level, please?
Absolutely, and we can pick that up again when I speak about the director's update report.
Thank you. Okay, that's all right. Fine. Good. So moving on. So we have one public question. I think Joanna's going to read it out.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've received a public question from Mr. Poynton. He's unable to be here in person today, so I will read his question out. It's regarding agenda item 8, the Climate Action Plan review. We understand there is a £1 million underspend from the Net Zero Villages investment programme and £2.25 million from the MTFP to spend by March 2025, the period covered by this plan. The main changes to the plan seem to be reducing its ambition and pushing out deliverable dates. We note the following items have new delivery dates of March 2025. These are the ones shown in Appendix A. Workstream 1.3, by October 2022, collectively build local capacity and capability to assemble suitable projects ready for these opportunities, build up project pipeline. Workstream 2.2, by July 2022, set up a fund for small-scale community projects to access to build local momentum and awareness, Net Zero Villages investment programme. Workstream 2.1 sets out a revised engagement plan, including COP input and an information website. These outcomes show a distinct lack of ambition for collectively building local capacity and capability. There is no mention of space being opened up for listening to the community, convening stakeholders, supporting initiatives, providing training and resources. Without this, it is hard to see where the Workstream 1.3 project pipeline is going to come from to enable impactful deployment of the available funds. What will be done differently in the next 12 months that hasn't been done in the past 2 years that will mean Workstream 1.3 and 2.2 can now be delivered?
Thank you. So thank you, Mr. Poynton, for your question, which is a very good question. And actually, you are raising some of the same questions that we, as members of this committee, have raised and will be raising today, in point of fact. So if I just take some of your points in order. So on the Net Zero Villages investment programme, I'm expecting us to have some debate on that today. So hopefully that debate will lead to some giving some confidence over the acceleration of this and the fact that well, I don't think any of us like money sitting in the bank that actually should be being spent and benefiting our communities. So that will be debated today. On building local capacity and capability. So again, I think we are working very closely with all the partner councils. There's also some very interesting emerging work coming out of the Oxford-Cambridge Pan-Regional Partnership as well. So, I think it's important that we don't think that as a combined authority we should be working in isolation. We need to be working in partnership, both with our own members, but also on a sort of wider level, particularly through the Pan-Regional Partnership, where I hope there might be some serious money coming through. You say that you feel there is a lack of ambition. There isn't a lack of ambition in this room. I hope that the refresh that we're going to be doing of the climate action plan convinces you that actually we're probably becoming more ambitious rather than less ambitious. It's been quite tricky so far, but the combined authority is now in a very different place to where it was a couple of years ago. And I think that ambition is very much a shared ambition. And I think, bearing in mind the support from the Oxford-Cambridge Pan-Regional Partnership and our involvement in that, I think that will help us. Obviously, the whole political agenda on climate is quite tricky at the moment. And once we have clarification about this government or the next government's intentions regarding net zero, and very critically biodiversity net gain, which we've seen some rowback on fairly recently, which does not align with our own ambition, where we have already stated that our intention is to double nature, and our recognition of the natural capital deficit in this area, and the fact that doubling it, certainly in my neck of the woods, and there aren't any woods, just brings it up to the national average and doesn't even exceed that. So, on a more positive note, we have made significant progress on the local transport and connectivity plan, and it is hoped that as we move to more decarbonisation of the public transport fleet, that accelerates, and we start making serious impact in getting cars off the roads. As I say, I think you'll hear quite a lot of debate today about the climate action plan and what our hopes are for a pretty rapid but also ambitious review of this. And you'll see that we are proposing allocating funding to Natural Cambridgeshire, who are very much our sort of delivery arm for leading on a lot of this work. Is that anything I've missed out, Judith?
I don't
No?
think so.
Okay, so thank you. So, sorry, I hope that wasn't too waffly. But thank you very much for your question, and I look forward to further questions, and hopefully you'll be pleased to see what happens over the next 12 months. So, moving on. Sorry, and I've just lost the agenda off my laptop. There we go. Thank you very much indeed. So, we're moving on to the forward plan. Sorry, I'm not following my script, am I? So, are there any questions? Yes, are there any questions or comments on the forward plan? Councillor Davenport, you've already said that you want the climate action plan to stay as an active action. Is there anything else? Yes, please come in.
I think this item is about the combined authorities forward plan. I don't have any comments on that, but I will have some comments about item 11, which is our committee's forward plan later in the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Righty-ho. So we're going over to the Director's report, and I'm delighted to introduce Judith Barker, who is already very, very engaged, immersed in all the work we're doing, and I know is very, very ambitious for this committee. So thank you, Judith, if you'd like to introduce your report.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you this morning at my first formal meeting, and I look forward to working with you all going forward and supporting the agenda that you're advancing here. So as you're aware, the Director's highlight report is really aiming at bringing out some of the key activities that aren't elsewhere on the agenda, but I think it is worth just picking out a couple of them for a brief introduction before handing over to you for the discussion and debate. The first one, of course, is the climate emergency point that we discussed at the last meeting, and as you can see from the papers, the advice that we've had from legal colleagues and experiences elsewhere is that we have to be really clear on our rationale and evidence. So why we're doing it and the basis for doing it. And we feel, as Councillor Dupre hinted at in her remarks earlier, that the work that we're doing on local determined contributions is going to really help develop that evidence base. And that work has commenced in February and is running until June 2025. Now, before then, obviously, we'll get the readout of that, and we will be able to use that in terms of the refresh of the Climate Change Action Plan, but also in advising us as to a basis and evidence base, as well as indications of what we could do with any declaration of an emergency. Hopefully that's a useful introduction. I think it's worth, because I've been on a journey of fully understanding what the locally determined contributions mean, and perhaps I can share some of that with you now, because certainly my understanding is there's a nationally determined contribution which has been set out in the many COPs and other activities that's happened. What this locally determined contribution will allow us to do is understand locally the targets, commitments and implementation plans we need to do to reach our contribution towards that national target. So it is really important work that we're doing across the whole of the area, using the local area energy plans as a specific example. And it will also give us a toolkit which is going to allow us to continue to use it going forward, which is clearly critically important. I was also going to draw out, because it was another area on the on the action plan, was that we will have in March the work, the internal work with a communications workshop to look at bringing forward the website. And I remember at your last meeting you were particularly focused on being able to share that information as well as we can to inform people's decision making. On the infrastructure development delivery framework, you'll be aware that Stantec were commissioned to do that work and are currently due to report at the end of April, which will allow us to bring their report in June. And they've been working with all local authorities to get both the sites that are identified in local plans and emerging sites to inform their work on what are the barriers to bringing forward those sites to allow us to bring forward both employment and residential land. So we will be bringing that report to your meeting in June. There's obviously the update on the Fordham houses, and I have my colleague Nick Sweeney here to take any questions that you may have on that. But again, that report will come forward in June. And then there is a quick update to the paper that you have in front of you at 3.1. The Sunica solar farm was due to have a report on the 7th of March. The deadline was the 7th of March, but that's now been moved out to April by the government. And in terms of the Fenland Reservoir, I did want to report that Bridget and I attended a particularly inspiring and informative water summit on Friday run by Elga, and that certainly brought many things to the forefront, and I'm sure water will continue to be a focus of this committee. But at that point, Bridget, Councillor Smith, I do apologise, I will hand back to you.
Thank you. First names are easier, I think, aren't they? Jolly good. Thank you very much indeed. Are there any questions? Mayor.
Thank you, Judith. And as our chair has already highlighted, I would acknowledge your hard work and having landed in our combined authority and how you've taken the bull by the horns in many areas. I've got another challenge for you, though, and it does relate to something within your report. It's in regard to Wisbech. You will be aware, hopefully everybody is aware, that one of the mayoral priorities is to protect, promote, highlight what is all good about the Fens. And obviously there was. I'm a positive person. I want to acknowledge that in amongst a rather unusual budget last week, there was a positive announcement for Wisbech as a town in part of an extended towns fund. £20 million is forthcoming. I am keen to understand where that funding is going to land. Obviously, we want to make sure it works for the people of Fenland. I acknowledge that we do not have the representative for Fenland District Council here at the moment, but obviously we have County Council here, so I'm sure you'll take an interest. As indeed, I think we all do. That certainly was borne out at our Vision Network and workshop last week, how people acknowledged the importance of the Fens and as part of a sort of combined plan for our area going forward. So I'd like to ask a question. Do you know where the £20 million are? We going to be the organisation that receives that money, and we will be passporting it through to the local area? Is it directed to the district council, county council? Is it through the local MP? So, and if we don't know, can we as a committee write to central government offering up, the vision that a combined authority with a function and clear-cut ambition to work with about delivering for a market town in the Fens? So that's kind of my first question, which I have another one, but I'll let others come in.
So if we could just respond to that. So I mean, the question really is, who's the accountable body for this money? Do we know? You have to do it 3 times.
Thank you. We don't know, so I think the Mayor's suggestion that we write to central government and find out. In other towns fund, the unitary authorities have held the funds for those towns and they received a similar sum. And that was very much about getting those projects signed off with an agreed set of outputs and outcomes with the DLUC department. So we can ask them what the processes are going to be for this round of towns funding that could make such an impact in Wisbech.
Okay, so if we're going to write to them, as well as asking that question, I'd be very keen that we ask if, because, it's about, how, whoever the accountable body is, do they have complete discretion? What are the, what are the terms of reference of this? What outcomes is government looking for? And I would quite like us to say something along the lines of, we hope that, significant amounts of this money will be allocated to moving Wisbech and the district to zero carbon, but also for environmental protection and enhancement. So I think we need to make that very clear that we as a combined authority would not be happy seeing that money spent on initiatives that moved our journey to zero carbon in the wrong direction, but also didn't do stuff that actually benefited the natural capital assets as well. Does anybody want to comment on that? Are you happy with that as a suggestion? You happy, Martin? Yeah. Looks slightly concerned. Okay, good. Okay. I'll come back to the Mayor for a second question and then I'll come to you, Martin.
Sorry, let others speak, Bridget. So, Chair, I'm happy to wait.
Thank you. Martin, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. My questions, there's a couple of them on the 100k homes for Fordham. The first thing is that just a comment is that it says to envisage the report shall be presented at the committee in June 2024. There is nothing on the forward agenda stating that. Right. One question is, who do the people at Fordham go to if they wish to sell their property, the owners now? Because obviously there was a bit of a mix-up when the first person came forward to sell their house. They came to the combined authority who had no idea it was their responsibility and they are passed it on to ECDC. So what's happening for anyone else who comes forward in the meantime?
Thank you very much. It's a really good question and one I was thinking of myself. Nick, would you like to throw some light on this? It's a bit of a mystery.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for the question. Yes, the last time an owner of one of these homes wanted to sell, they did approach the combined authority, and you're completely right. Officer has left who had previously managed the scheme. However, we did arrange for an officer decision notice to be completed, whereby we enabled East Cambridgeshire District Council to nominate a purchaser from their list of eligible people, because obviously our staff had left and no list was maintained at the current time. That house sale is now complete. I understand everything's as it should have been. Now, your question about what would we do if another purchaser came forward. On the documentation that we've seen, there is an agreement whereby the combined authority would nominate another purchaser, and so we'd expect that we'd do a similar arrangement as we did with the last purchaser, whereby we'd undertake another officer decision notice to enable that person to sell their home. What we've done in the interim, as committee asked us to do, we've explored the options of keeping the scheme running, resurrecting it, as I say, or transferring our ability to nominate to the freeholder, or alternatively to permanently transfer what rights we have to East Cambridgeshire District Council. Now, because of the implications involved, I've undertaken some research to establish the background relating to our ability to formally nominate, because all we've seen to date is an agreement. So I've explored with East Cambridgeshire District Council whether or not there was the proper legal framework in place for us to properly nominate purchasers. And I've received a copy of the nominations agreement that was signed through the planning obligation, the 106, and I've had a look at it, and I've raised some queries with our monitoring officer about that going forward. So when the monitoring officer has made comments, then I'll be in a proper position to report back to committee. I didn't put it on the forward plan because I thought, well, we'll wait and see what the monitoring officer said, but I hope to put it on the forward plan now and be in a position to report back in June if I'm able to do so. So I hope that explains the situation, but to reassure you, I envisage that if one of those homeowners wants to move, then we'll replicate what we did last time to enable that to happen. And the last thing we want to do is for complicate an already very complicated house sale.
Thank you very much. Do you want to respond at all, Martin, or is that sufficient?
Thank you, Chair. That's sufficient for
Yeah.
now, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a dog's dinner, isn't it, really? Yes. Okay, well, well done. Thank you very much.
I'd just like to add, I've had correspondence from Fordham Parish Council on this matter as well, and they're in agreement with, or they would go forward with it going to East Cambridge District Council. They're in favour of that. And they also have a list of local people on their waiting to go into these affordable housing as well.
Okay, are they communicating with us? Because it's really important that we have the full picture. Fordham Parish Council.
No, we haven't communicated yet. Committee did ask for us to seek the views of local residents and the homeowners, not local residents. So I was going to do that, but I thought I'd better get belt and braces, our legal position, before I write letters.
Fine, thank you. Martin, would you pass that or ask them if you can pass that correspondence on, please? And then we make that connection, and then we can be communicating with them directly, because it sounds as if they've possibly done a little bit of the legwork as well for us. So that's great. It sounds like something we need to move on, because actually it sounds horrendously labour intensive for us. And of course, if another officer leaves, we'll start from scratch again, don't we? So, okie doke. Right. Thank you very much, Nicola. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to sort of highlight and ask a couple of questions from the Director's report on the Centre for Green Technology in Peterborough. Clearly, I've been following this progress of this centre, this 13.5 million centre, and I think it's absolutely needed to develop those skills that it lists in the report. We know that some projects cannot often go forward because we haven't got that skill set within our constituencies and communities. I think something I wanted to kind of say is, I mean, the fact that the project is going to comply with BREEAM, which are really, really high levels of construction and building, is fantastic. I know it's due for completion in November 2024. I was going to ask a question around when would the first intake of students take place. I'm assuming that would be September 2025. And also for us to bear in mind, once we get students through these courses at this Green Skills Centre, how will we cascade those skills around the region? How will we make sure that that there are the jobs, that there are the projects that we will probably be leading on some of those projects for students to take part in? We have got an Eco Homes project in Peterborough and we have already linked up with the Green Skills Centre. We're not sure whether it will be ready or students will be ready to take part in it, but we're looking at doing some research work around what we're trying to do at the council. So just two questions. When will it be open, and how might we cascade those skills across the region? Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Have you got the answer to that?
I don't have the details off ready here, but what I will do is speak to Claire Paul, who is the interim assistant director of skills and employment, and have a conversation with her. It may be that there's already those plans in place, and I think the second point that you made about how it fits with the wider ecosystem is also really important. So I'll pick up both of those points and perhaps provide a written note back to the committee.
Thank you. Is that all right? So, I mean, rarely take part in a meeting these days where we don't talk about skills shortage. The Water Summit was one example. I was down in London with the Energy Audit Commission there. Again, we just simply don't have the people to do all this stuff. I presume we've done work, Judith, on mapping the skills shortage within our area.
I'll get the hang of this soon, won't I? There's a lot of work that's happening at the moment. And in fact, I was talking with the assistant director only last week about some mapping on cold spots for FE, that we've actually got some consultants doing some very specific work to understand not only what the cold spots are, but what the best solutions are, and whether those solutions are around increasing provision, which they may be in some cases, but also where they're actually about providing better transport solutions to get people to existing locations and courses. So there's absolutely a considerable amount of work that's happening. There's a lot of wider labour market information as well that is readily available. Precisely what's available on the green skills area, I'm not sure, but again, I can pick that up with Claire and make that as part of a note to this committee.
Thank you very much. I think we just need to make sure that there's kind of synergy between further education cold spots and lack of skills. So I know St Neots, is a cold spot, but actually, is it a cold spot for mechanics and hairdressing and the stuff that actually we probably have enough people for, but absolutely we don't have people for who can fit air source heat pumps. So I think I've seen figures nationally of about 115,000 heat pump installers needed, that sort of thing. So I think there's all the information nationally out there, but I think we need to know exactly what skills, and I'm sure it's there. Cambridge Ahead or somebody will have this information about exactly what skills are needed and where they are needed. So I presume this centre's it's one of the offshoots of Anglia Ruskin. I presume the same as it's not. It's something different, is it?
Sorry, it's Peterborough Regional College. It's on that campus, and the regional college is very much a kind of, developing sort of the practical skill sets for students. But you're right, there is a UCP centre, which is a university centre on that campus as well, and then a separate campus is Anglia Ruskin.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, did you want to comment on that?
Well, just to sort of add, there's a lot going on in Peterborough, and at this time next week I'll be in Westminster working with local MPs, in the Combined Authority, across the board, and indeed Anglia Ruskin University, where there is possibly some of the confusion, and we will be looking at the Energy Transition Centre business case launch, which is a very it's a sort of thing that the next stage on with regard to Anglia Ruskin University, and it's a sort of a bit of a trailer there, but it's something that I'm certainly very pleased that we will be doing through the Combined Authority, but working in collaboration with partners.
Right, I think we could do with a briefing sometime on this, because I haven't got my head around it, quite honestly. But just the evidence base, the business case, the who's providing what, where do I send a child, a 16-year-old in my village to when there's no public transport. Okay, thank you, Lorna. It's the green 3 times, green light.
Right, got it. Three things. Firstly, synergy between FE cold spots, skills and transport would be brilliant. The training centre at Alconbury Weald continues to haunt, I think, in that respect, and it would be, that's a really important part of the mix, and I'm very pleased that you mentioned that. Secondly, on the 100k homes at Fordham, I am mystified by the statement, which has just gone off my screen because it's decided it's had enough. Officers from East Cambridgeshire District Council have confirmed that 100k homes were approved as an acceptable form of affordable housing tenure for the development. I don't understand what that means. Approved by whom? When? Acceptable to whom? On what grounds? That it simply makes no sense as a statement. If there is something behind that that is actually informative, it would be useful to hear. But I'm not at all clear what that's telling us at the moment that informs this debate. And the third thing I wanted to raise in connection with the Fenland Reservoir, I guess, for want of anything else, is the case for Cambridge and the water aspect of that, and this whole concept of water offsetting. I remain deeply, deeply sceptical about that. I do understand that the Greater Cambridge Planning Service needs some form of agreement, statement, way forward, which means that it can unlock the developments which are currently blocked by the Environment Agency on water sufficiency grounds. But it is not at all clear to me how water offsetting will increase the availability of water, particularly in the short to medium term in Cambridge and its hinterland. And I'm really keen that we keep an eye on that as a committee to ensure that it actually is a real thing and not just a flag of convenience. Thank you.
Thank you. So on your last point, I think we could spend the whole of the rest of the day talking about water, actually. And again, I think, it's something else that when we have greater clarity about what the plan is for water, we need a briefing on that as well, because it is this committee's responsibility to make sure that there are environmental advantages to it. So on your first question, I think you're asking, does East Cambridgeshire's housing strategy include £100,000 homes as affordable? You're asking, is there formal documentation within East Cambridgeshire, within their own housing strategy? I think Nick's raring to go on an answer.
I think I'm asking for the meanings of the words approved and acceptable and some timelines around that.
Thank you.
Yes, it's a good question. Apologies for the clarity. It's a summary paragraph here that's been written. So where we are, committee asked that we explore the option of transferring our rights to the freeholder. So obviously I went back to absolute basics here and thought, well, we need to clarify all the nuts and bolts were in order. So I went back to the planning website and I looked at the planning permission that was granted for the Fordham development as a whole. Now, within that publicly available documentation was a Section 106 agreement, which specifies that there needed to be affordable housing as a mix of the housing that was allowed as part of the outline planning application. So if you're allowed to build 100 houses, you might have to provide 40 affordable houses, that type of agreement. Now, the 106 specified so many market shared ownerships or the mix, but it didn't specify 100k homes because they didn't exist at the time that the 106 was signed. So I thought, right, well, we better clear this up because obviously it's going to come back and it might affect our decision how we deal with these properties going forward. So I asked East Cambridgeshire District Council for a copy of the nominations agreement because that would specify exactly the combined authorities entitlement to nominate people. And also I asked them as well for confirmation that 100k homes had been approved by the local planning authority for the development because they weren't in the 106. Anyway, I got a copy of the nominations agreement and that did specify 100k homes. So that cleared the first bit off. But there are some elements of the nominations agreement whereby I've referred them to the monitoring officer because I'd like some clarity. So hopefully that satisfies your concern, and that's why we haven't put it on the forward plan, and I'm not presenting the findings of the exercise at this committee. I hope to be able to do so in June, providing that the monitoring officers provided all the information that's required.
Thank you very much, Nick, for your due diligence in this matter, and that helps explain what's actually happened. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay, so still a lack of clarity, but a work in progress. So thank you very much indeed. Right, Mayor, back to you.
Thank you, Chair, for indulging me with another question. It's in regard to another massive infrastructure project, which I don't think obviously is in the report, but it regards to the dreadful news for the people of Wisbech about the arrival or supposed arrival of the Medworth incinerator. Even before I was ever elected as mayor and soon after as elected as mayor, I made it very clear that on a personal level and the campaigning point of view, I thought this was wholly inappropriate for the town of Wisbech. I mean, in some ways, you give with one hand and take with the other. The 20 million is to be welcomed, but if the population of Wisbech now have to be confronted with just a mega incinerator, and all that it contains, it can't be right that at this time we are now talking about burning rubbish. It does not feel in keeping with a lot of what, as I think as a combined authority, we are pushing for in terms of good waste management strategies. I really am looking to see here, and maybe some steer from the combined authority board, or indeed this committee, as to how we maybe kind of take it forward as to what we can do. And expressing our absolute frustration. On paper, there's a local MP who's, Secretary of State for Environment, and I think we should be kind of, looking for support in that area where possible. But at the moment, I can only say I'm absolutely devastated for the people of Wisbech, and I really hope we can do something to support them to turn this decision around.
Does anybody else want to comment on this issue at the moment? I kind of think it's another of these political, debates that need to go on, that need to happen, as a matter of urgency. Obviously, as mayor, you obviously have the freedom to voice your own opinions on anything. But I think, it's another of those kind of slightly, as you say, tricky ones that we need to talk about outside of a formal meeting like this. Councillor Dupre, Lorna.
Thank you. This was extraordinary. On the day the decision was announced, I remember having to rush up to Wisbech in order to talk to the media about this, having just been tipped the wink that actually it was the day after the announcement, having just been tipped the wink that the announcement had been withdrawn from the website on which it had been announced, which was quite inexplicable. And it was then within about 48 hours reinstated with the comment that nothing had changed. And we're all still mystified, I think, about that. There was a suggestion, which is my second point of three, that it might have been to do with the fact that the Environment Agency's consultation on the permitting for the functioning of the incinerator had not closed at the point that the announcement was made. Whether that was relevant or not, I'm still not sure. And I don't know. I don't think the Environment Agency has yet announced what the outcome of that consultation was, and I'm not sure what the timeline is for that. Whether or not that will have any impact on the construction and permission per se for an incinerator, I'm not sure either, but I do think we need to watch the development of the permitting aspect of all of this. And the third thing, of course, is the decision by Fenland District Council to kick off a process of exploring whether there are grounds for judicial review of the decision. I'm not sure what that will come to, but I'm fairly sure, because it was made clear in the meeting, that if they are advised that there are grounds for judicial review, they will be coming around to every partner they can think of and asking for financial resource to support a judicial review of the decisions. So again, we won't want to preempt that, but we will, I assume, want to keep an eye on the development on that and whether there are any grounds that can be legitimately brought forward on which a judicial review might have a chance of success.
Thank you very much. So the reason I don't want to sort of jump to a decision on this is I simply don't know enough about it. you know, I know what I've read in the newspapers, and that's all I know. And I think, you know, what the Environment Agency's response is going to be is absolutely critical on this. And I think it's probably the main piece of evidence which we need to base our discussions on. Are we happy about that? Okay. Right.
Thank you, Chair.
So, Judith, we do want to have a discussion about the Net Zero Villages programme, but is this not, should we be doing that later in the agenda, do you suggest?
I'm either comfortable to do it now, or we could pick it up when we go through the budget, Chair. I'm comfortable with your choice.
Laura, what would you like to do?
Yes, I'd rather wait until the budget.
Do the budget
item.
bit. Okay, that's fine, because I think there's a few of us want to talk about this. Okay, anything else? No, okay. That was...
Sorry, Chair. I have
Yep, certainly. Oh,
a
sorry.
question on this
No, please
item.
do.
Really a comment and then two questions. We were talking about skills. I think it's important that we recognize that it isn't just local authorities that are important in developing skills of our staff. There is room here for private industry, for the employers themselves. And so you will have seen in the last few months the development of another skills hub in St. Ives being led by Reed, the consultant who helps people find jobs. So I think in that conversation, we need to think outside the box. It's not all up to just us. Employers also are part of the game in upskilling their own employees. My questions on your report, Judith, are, first of all, at our January meeting, this committee agreed to recommend to the board to reconvene the Climate Commission as soon as possible. So if you have any feedback on that, that would be helpful. And then also in your report, you talk about the communications plan of the Climate Action Plan and a workshop regarding the website. I'm curious when that might come to us. Who would be invited to that workshop on the website? I think we heard in the public question a bit of frustration around that element of comms, including our communities in that Climate Action Plan. And so I'd like to know more about what happens next.
Thank you, Judith.
Yes, thank you for the question. On the skills piece, I think it will clearly be very helpful if I have quite a wide-ranging conversation with the Assistant Director for Skills and Employment and bring that back to this committee. Regarding the Climate Commission, in fact, Steve Cox and I were speaking about the importance of that this morning and bringing that forward. So that is one of the things that we're going to follow. I think the most useful thing to do would be, given the fact that we've got the refresh of the Climate Change Action Plan happening at the moment, but then a much more substantive piece of work for the 25 to 28 timeline, that would seem really important that they are kicking that off and involved there. So I think Adrian and I will work closely in terms of a timeline, thinking about how they become involved at the start and thinking about that piece then. So that will certainly be the timeline for that piece of work, and how we're taking that forward will need to come to the June committee, and that will include how we've engaged the Climate Commission and are going forward. Regarding the communications workshop, the initial workshop will be an officer workshop led by our colleagues in the communications team in March, but clearly we need to move beyond that. And you'll be pleased to know that Adrian and I have been working very closely with the head of comms, Ed Coleman, and he's developing a number of what he's describing as campaigns, the key things that the authority will be proactively moving ahead on in 24-25, and one of the, I can't remember if it's 4 or 5 different campaigns that will be the key kind of proactive focus, but one of those is around the net zero agenda, and this workshop forms part of that. So I'm just wondering if it would be useful, Chair, to have an update on that comms strategy to this committee in June, so that you can have an input, discuss it, and perhaps refocus particular areas in that discussion.
I think it'll be really helpful. Lara?
I think one thing I'm keen to avoid is we can think about what comms should look like, officers can think about what comms should look like, but really we need to have young people in the room telling us what comms work for them. And I haven't seen their voice involved in this so far, so I'd love to see that.
Good point. Anything else? No? Okay, so we're asked to note this report. Thank you very much, Need. Thank you very much, Judith. That was very comprehensive without having too many words, which is always welcome. Right, so we're going to skip over number 6, which is the budget, just for now, and take it a bit later. So we're moving on to the affordable housing programme update on implementation. So over to Asma, who I think has been working extremely hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Right, I'll just give you a brief update on where we're at. We have 827 new homes completed to date, 611 new homes yet to be completed. We've had some issues with Halo and the Vistry sites that I presented way back in September, and there's been a bit of a swap around. Unfortunately, the units that were promised to us through the loss of Willows Wood and All Angels will no longer proceed. However, Halo has agreed with Vistry, and we are signing GFAs this week on the units that are presented below, which are the units in South Cambridgeshire, Peterborough and East Cambridgeshire, those being the Boulevards, Hampton Waters and Quantum Fields. The heads of terms have been agreed, and like I said, we are signing GFAs this week, so that's imminent. Following on from that, I did contact all the local authorities, and they were pleased to receive these units. Moving along swiftly, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, we went to the Northminster topping up ceremony. That was just, they've put the roofs on the 2 big blocks at Northminster. I believe the Deputy Mayor attended, and it was well received. And then another one that's going to be presented at the end of this month is Wisbeach Road March, which will be renamed Woodgate Park. And that is a photo caller launch event as well. That's on the 27th of March. Moving forward, we are having some delivery from British Sugar Way, but we have been told that completion will now be their long stop date in August 2024, unfortunately. Perkins Phase 2, we've still got issues with road audit, but that is being resolved as I believe. And Stand Ground is also progressing quite well as well. We still have issues with building regs and sources of energy being done on the site as we speak. All projects will hopefully complete at the end of the calendar year, except for Great Haddon, which will be early next year, which is part of the urban Peterborough extension.
Always optimistic.
Try to be, try to be.
Well done, well done. It would be, I think at one time we did have a map, didn't we, showing the distribution of all the housing on this scheme. Be quite a long time. Quite nice, not an emergency, because I know you're really busy, but it'd be quite nice to see that again, just so that I think our members would be interested to see actually this. What has been successful about this is the coverage of the whole of the combined authority area, that nowhere has benefited, more than anywhere. Well, perhaps some places have benefited more than anywhere else, but that we have all benefited. I think would be quite nice to have. Okay, any questions on any of the detail of this, Mike?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to explain, I'm not the Deputy Mayor of Cambridge Peterborough Combined Authority. That was Councillor Anna Smith. But it was a pleasure to go, and my role on this committee as well, to see the development at Northminster. Just to clarify that.
Lovely, lovely. It's always really interesting. I always have a test, would I let my mum live there? And that's always my test, or whether, things are good enough. Any other questions on this? No, Asma, thank you very much, as always, for keeping such a close rein on what seems to be an ever-moving feast, quite honestly. But, thank you very much. Do you want to go? Right, moving swiftly on to Huntingdonshire Biodiversity for All programme. Let me just get my papers up. Sorry, I've got a clunky laptop today. Oh, no, there isn't a paper. This is just a verbal, is it, from Helen?
She has some slides.
Oh, you've got like marvellous, jolly good. Right, crack on. We'd be very interested in this. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair. I didn't know whether Lara wanted to say anything to start with, or are you? Okay.
I shall. So this is an update on a project that Huntingdonshire District Council has been completing using funding from the Combined Authority. And the idea overall is, how do we get local communities and local people increasing their own biodiversity, caring about their own biodiversity, and most of all, as we're a combined authority, how can Huntingdonshire's work help inform what the other authorities are doing? What can we learn and then teach to each other, and hopefully be able to apply this work elsewhere? It's been very positive so far. I'm very excited for you to hear about the results and think about how you might apply it in your district.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, sorry, my name's Helen Lack. I work at Huntingdonshire District Council. So I look after our parks, the strategic direction of our parks and open spaces here, but then I also look after our climate team and our more recently formed biodiversity team, courtesy of the grant. I've built this set of slides as a bit of a standalone piece of work as well, so there is quite a lot of words on them, and I won't be taking you through everything, but I will share them afterwards so that you can actually use them at your ease. When I've got a clicker. There we go. Okay, so I'll move mine forward at the same time. Lovely. So in February 22, we were very fortunate and grateful to receive a grant from the Combined Authority for 1.3 million to increase biodiversity in Huntingdonshire. Soon after that, we moved as a district council to adopt our own climate action plan, which was a delivery-led strategy, which had a very strong feeling behind it in terms of our residents wanting to deliver biodiversity improvements and support their climate in the local area. One of our district-wide priorities is actually to increase biodiversity and natural capital within Huntingdonshire, with one of our enable and influence priorities actually to support this particular project. Okay, there we go. The project itself, as we started to unpick what we sort of said we were going to do, it actually started building itself into 5 key pillars. It was nebulous. So what we wanted to do is make sure that we could lock our ideas and the smaller projects within the programme into particular pillars so that we could actually deliver and show you measurable improvement from those particular areas. The 5 areas, the first one would be the actual Combined Authority grant, the governance around that and how we would manage that internally. The second one was about jobs and skills and how biodiversity can be included into those. Then we have the strategic open spaces sites, which is a piece of work looking at our larger parks within the district and how they can be connected. Community-driven delivery. This is very much where Lara was saying about us actually bringing biodiversity opportunities to our local communities. And the last one was mapping and making everything we're learning into an accessible tool for people to be able to use on a very strategic level and actually also on a very sort of family level. I'll show you in a moment. There's an app you can download, so I'll challenge you all to that at the end. Click there. I doubt you'll be able to read all the words on there, but I just wanted to give you a slice, really, of the grant funding agreement that we've signed with yourselves, just to show you the areas of revenue and capital we're working on. So those particular areas have, as you can see, it started in 22-23, but we've worked with Adrian to make sure that we've got a workable budget going forward. So each of those areas is split down over those 5 key pillar areas. So the first pillar area is the CPCA grant. As I said, I think you're not good. It's quite, I can barely read that. So the grant itself, on its most basic level, has allowed us to employ a fantastic team. They're my biodiversity team, and shown here on the slide with Lara in the middle. And they were actually at this particular day had been nominated for an award at our District Council iCare Awards for being so collaborative. They comprise of a project manager, a project support officer, and 2 full-time graduate ecologists. Those graduate ecologists are absolutely worth their weight in gold. The work that they've been able to move and the connections they've made us or created for us as a district council is phenomenal. We've worked, and I have spoken with Claire Poole at the Combined Authority to think about how not just graduate ecologists, graduate planners, things like that how they can actually help, and maybe we could use our learning of moulding these graduates straight out of uni into a local government, how we can use that kind of learning we've done to spread that out over other areas. At the moment, we're profiling their workload. There's a lot of surveying to do, which I will explain in a moment. So they're very, very busy sort of over the summer periods. I've written here they were conduits to connecting and making a real difference. I can't say enough how much difference they've made already, and certainly as looking after my own services, I will be building in this particular role into our structure going forward, because it creates a real nice conduit between other areas such as our operational spaces, our planning spaces. They can create those kind of links. So moving into our second area, which is the jobs and skills. Lara and I were very fortunate to be invited to the graduation ceremony for the 4th one of these we've done. So I meant to put an icon on here for Groundwork East. We've been working with them to deliver green skills projects for local people to build their skills and knowledge and actually achieve a qualification. The 4th one was at Paxton Pits, but we've had one at Hinchinbrook Country Park, the Spring Common, which has actually led to a summer placement there happening, and actually a local group has carried on working in that area. Regatta Meadows in St Neots and Paxton Pits. Paxton Pits, I've written here, shout out to Jacob and Eve. Jacob and Eve are the delivery officers at Groundwork East. They are the most fantastic people and so inspiring to listen to when they're working with these people, giving them opportunities to get out and about. Some of those quotes on there, you can see this has been the best time of my life. There was people there that were struggling to get out of bed in the morning, but this has given them the opportunity to do that. One of them, I don't want to say fortunately, because actually he worked for it, has started a job today from the Paxton Pit. So he graduated on Thursday last week and has started a job from being unemployed for quite a while, his first job today. And it's also leading to volunteering opportunities within our own parks and actually within the National Trust and things like that as well. So these are people that have been referred through the job seekers to just to go outside and actually have that real feeling of being connected to nature whilst actually delivering projects within our parks and open spaces that deliver biodiversity improvement. Oh no, not touchscreen, are we? There we go. And moving on to my next area is the Strategic Open Spaces site. As I was saying earlier, I look after our parks and open spaces in terms of their strategic management here at District Council. So this one actually is quite strong to my heart. All the project areas I'm showing you are green. We are due for delivery for this particular ranch in March next year. Each park has been in receipt of a very comprehensive ecological survey as a result of this grant. Within those audits, there is a series of scenarios that can be delivered within those parks that will improve biodiversity. But I don't want to just do those without actually obviously speaking to those communities and building up community-led designs within those parks. We're just about to start working on our first tranche of those sites. We did take a paper through our committee system earlier this year, sort of explaining our prioritisation process. The first 3 are just about to start, and we're working in partnership with a company called Glendale, who will be leading a community engagement programme, an education programme about identifying specific projects within those parks that is evidence-led, that will actually make a big difference to those parks. It will obviously also hopefully create us opportunities to work with the green skills as well, to bring them into our own parks too. I think so. On the right-hand side there, I literally doubt you can see that. It's just basically a flow chart explaining of all our different parks as to whether they fall into our short, medium, and long term for this project. And the bottom right-hand corner is a concept design that's been pulled together by Glendale's to start informing those community engagement pieces. This is an example of one pulled out of one of the audits that we have had done to just sort of give you an idea of how we, as officers, we've been given the information about how we need to translate that back to our communities and make that meaningful for them. So in terms of scenario one, there kind of are more quick fixes, things that can happen quite quickly. And as you move through the scenarios, you get sort of higher level impact things such as creating orchard habitats. They are cumulative. So those figures on the right-hand side, there's an enormous amount of statistics that sit behind those, and I don't even pretend to understand them. That's why we've got these amazing ecologists. But they actually show the sort of the levels of improvement in biodiversity in that park as a result of those three scenarios. Can I come in? Of course you can.
So I'd like to give you an example to help understand this. So Berman Park in St. Ives is one of the parks that Helen looks after. And so the first step was our ecologists to go and develop a baseline. What does ecology look on that site now? And then to come up with a list similar to this of different options of things that could happen there to uplift the biodiversity. So the percentages there are the increase in biodiversity units on the site. So we come up with these options, but then the next step is, well, what does the community think? So officers and myself going to the town, talking to the eco-action groups, the St. Ivan Blooms groups, the people who use the park, and try to work out what is the balance in that space between how people want to use it and how can we improve the biodiversity at the same time. So those are sort of the three steps on these strategic sites owned by our council.
Thank you, Laura. Moving on to, you'll be pleased to know we're on the fourth, is our community-driven delivery. This slide doesn't look particularly fancy. However, behind it is the most immense amount of work in terms of us working with the local communities to create a grant process for them to actually apply for funding from us well, initially it's to actually apply for some time from our ecologists. So it's about creating an opportunity for communities that wouldn't normally have access to an ecologist or a professional service. So that we've had 35 expressions of interest, of which we've whittled down to 10. Of those 10, they will receive time with our ecologists and a detailed audit, so giving those kind of scenario processes within there. Then they will be invited to apply for a grant from us, obviously fed through from the grant from the combined authority to help deliver those processes. Where we can, we will be able to help and be on site and sort of create that kind of community engagement piece whilst we're there. But we're actually in the process of, we've just announced the 10 that have got through. Some of those are schools, which is fantastic. So we've actually got a couple of schools in the local area who are very keen to create sort of wildlife areas, improve their forest schools and things like wildlife ponds and things like that. Let me just check I've covered off all these bits. Yeah, of course you can.
So for me, in this area, the most important aspect of this scheme is actually not about money. So if there are communities that want to improve their biodiversity, one of their major barriers for them to funding is they don't know what exactly they want to do, how they would do it, or how much it would cost. So there might be grant opportunities out there, but they're not able to apply for it because they don't have the background information. So in our community biodiversity grant scheme, the first step is one of our ecologists visits, does the baseline audit, and then gives them some options with some costings. So that the second step is, do they want to move forward? And if so, which of the options do they want to do? And then the parish council or the local community group can decide that for themselves. So it's sort of unlocking the goodwill of wanting to increase biodiversity where they don't have the skills yet to be able to do that.
Thank you. And just to add to that, the audit that those graduate ecologists does is a very much piece of information and a document that community can keep. So obviously with the level 1, 2 and 3, it might be that we can just deliver some level 1 things, but they can then use that evidence-based document to apply for other external grants as well within their communities. That brings me down to our mapping element. So this is where I will challenge you when you go home, speak to your families, to download the iNaturalist app. There's no cost to it, it's free. It's a piece of software that's been developed internationally in terms of it's an AI driven, so you can point it at whatever you found in your back garden or on your walk, and it will help identify those. But crucially, what it does is it actually it holds that data internally, and then it's actually shared for scientific benefits nationally. So just to go back to before I got all excited, then I've told you about the app and I haven't actually told you about so this particular element is about building up layers of mapping for biodiversity and ecology in the local area. The first, from the top level, we're building up a strategic map where we've worked with the Wildlife Trust to create habitat maps that can be used to inform our local LNRS. On the middle level, we've got this mapping that has come in from our external ecologists and obviously our own ecologists to actually build a layer up of, so you've got those big dominant priority areas, and then I'm bringing it down to a more strategic space in terms of our biodiversity, and then bringing it down one step to the community where we will actually be able to use our own data to actually show sort of much more of a micro level of the biodiversity in those areas. And that's the point where we're challenging our communities as part of this to actually get as many people using iNaturalist, or there is a more sort of child-friendly version of it called iSeek. The bonus of the actual app is it's backed up by scientists behind it. So every time you upload a observation, it is verified. And then we've actually, as you can see on there, you perhaps can't. We've had up to the point we wrote these slides, which is a few weeks ago now, we'd had over 9,500 observations already. We've got 1,500 active users, and we've already had 1,800 species recorded in the district, of which 800 are non-native and invasive species. That is quite important in terms of we are able to help the scientists behind all of this map where those species are and how far they're moving through the county and the country. We've also worked very closely with a local group called Wild About Huntingdon, who has been a very strong partner with us in terms of delivering some of these, what we're calling local bio blitzes, where we encourage residents to come down with us. Our ecologists will be there and they can roam the fields with their app and see what they can find. Yeah, push go.
So I'm going to give you two examples of this. The first is, I think we all know that ecologists are becoming like gold dust. And no matter how many we get upskilled as fast as we can, we're going to need citizen science to help us map nature. And so that's part of the drive behind using this app. So if I'm walking around my housing estate and I hear a bird that I don't recognize, I open up the app, it listens to the bird, it gives me a suggestion of what species it thinks it is. I input that, it knows exactly where on the planet that happened, and then ecologists behind the scenes can say, yes, Laura, we agree with what you've identified or not. And then I can also take the app and challenge all of our scout groups, all of our forest schools to be using them as well. And so citizen science-wise, trying to map nature in our area. And then Helen mentioned BioBlitz. So that's an idea where if we own a large site, the district council, we might invite citizens to come with the app in their hand and walk around our site all in one day together and help us map the nature on that site. So we're building up evidence bases, not just for LNRS is one, but for our local plan review as well. So any mapping we can do of nature is being happening here through citizen science.
Thank you, Laura. So that takes me on to the last three slides. There's not a chance you're going to see these, but I will skip through them quite quickly to show you this is the journey we've been on. So once you have these slides in your inboxes, you can perhaps have a look through. But I just wanted to sort of visually show you where we've been up to. So that's it. Oh, is that me or you? I thought I'd broken it. So it's colour-coded in terms of those different pillars that we talked about, and it identifies the different points at which we've hit the green skills programmes. So the red line did show where we were when I did these slides, but I need to move my red line along, I think, a little bit. There we go. And that's me. So thank you very much for your time today, and I'm more than happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you very much. That's by far the most interesting presentation I've listened to for a long time, and you're obviously and quite rightly very proud of what you've achieved. So well done. And I'm going to ask you to come and present to my Climate and Environment Action Committee at some time, if you ever have any time between in between mapping the whole of Huntingdonshire. So, any questions? Yes, Nicola.
Thank you. That's a really incredible presentation. I've certainly tried to do biodiversity work on a ward-based level, but to see it being implemented across the authorities is really fantastic. I just wondered if you could highlight maybe how the project has affected young people and new graduates. Obviously, you've mentioned your graduates at the moment, but I wondered if you could answer that. Thank you.
Yes, no problem. One thing I didn't mention actually was when we, I think it was last summer, we were approached by Anglian Ruskin University to be part of their, it's called their SHOKE programme, so it's putting students in the centre of knowledge exchange. So what district councils have the opportunity to work with SHOKE to help them build the abilities and skills of their actual students. So they basically come to us and ask for a problem, a short-term problem that they can actually take to a group of students that have been picked or have volunteered to actually sort of go outside their comfort zone a little bit, not necessarily their own subject matter, but create a team to try and solve that problem. They go away for 6 weeks, they work themselves up into a team, work a project up and a solution, and come back and report to us. We've done that with several different teams now, but one of them was actually able to go away and come up with a metric to help us assess the grant process when they've come back in. So obviously we've got some really fantastic grant ideas for grants coming on those expressions of interest, but it was about how do we actually quantify that and how do we score those and them not be completely subjective. So they actually they were the guys that actually created the very first set of those scores. So we've tried to make sure that students are very involved in those. The other areas we've worked with is the grant process in terms of the local schools that have actually applied for those. I think we've had 3 local schools, and one of those local schools is already connected with the council in terms of working with PECT in Peterborough to do some climate sustainability work with their students there. So it's a really nice kind of triangle that's matched up there. So I'm really quite excited for that one to happen. Any other schools that I've missed? No, I'll just double check. Yeah, no, I think.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Thank you very much. Any other questions, Mayor?
Some of those might turn out questions, and some of them will be observations. Well, first of all, Helen, thank you for the work that you are doing, and Lara, obviously, for the ongoing work that you do, as always, at Huntingdon District Council. I can only say I have a certain degree of swelling of satisfaction to see you, actually to be sitting here and seeing the presentation, and I agree, very enjoyable. If I reflect on the journey, I am reminded, and Bridget will remember the first budget setting process of a new combined authority and in difficult times. But this one, it was also at the time, if you put into context, at COP26, Glasgow, we were asking different areas to put forward ideas. There was a bit of a pitching, and it was a bit of a dog's dinner, if I'm honest. But this one shone through. And so, to be fair, that was the administration at the time. But the changes that have come within Huntingdonshire District Council and the willingness with your, but at officer level and the sort of elected members administration to kind of work, put party politics to the side and then move forward in actually giving answers and involving the community in this challenge about biodiversity is an absolute fantastic to see. So it really is more of, a comment to say thank you. I'm delighted this was one of the projects that was in that first budget setting process, but we were trying to set a new narrative here at the Combined Authority, and it has come to fruition. So more power to the elbow on that, and I just want to put that on record. As we move forward, I've got my questions are more challenging because what you're demonstrating is the ability to care and to work together. But I've got a couple of issues I want to ask about. One is particularly working with the county council on a problem that I know Lorna knows about the issue of where we've got these major projects. and often biodiversity is a part of it, and we've been failed in terms of the regeneration around the A14 and the A42A, where we've had trees that have been put in for biodiversity and offsetting, where they are actually, is there an example here where community groups could be working together in conjunction with the County Council Highways Authority to kind of really pull those, and let's make our highways exemplars for the whole of the country through these routes, maybe focusing initially in Huntingdonshire, which is particularly relevant around the A14 making good on what went wrong. And I've had those conversations through the Combined Authority before around making sure these things land. So that's one question. And a final one, if you would indulge me, Chair, is I do recall in amongst various punts for funding where you were successful, there was at the time the narrative of something called the Future Parks Partnership, which I now believe is something called the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Parks Partnership. You yourself said this could be exemplar and it could be, rolled out further. It sounds good to know you're here with PACT. I was just interested to know, knowing that that was something in the past the Combined Authority strategically has worked with. I believe the Future Parks is no longer up and running, but has been rebranded. And I don't know if you could maybe, if it's something that you're aware of, you could maybe give me reassurance that's maybe something that we could see again as we move forward across the whole of the area. Sorry, that was very indulgent. Thank you.
So first I'll tackle the highways question. When we wrote our climate strategy and when we developed this project, we try to be very realistic. There are things we can do, things we can enable, and things we can influence, and they're different. So can we plant the verges of the A14? No, but we have to use our voice to influence what's happening there. And if we as a collective voice can all do that together, it has much more power. So I think the answer is that's something we have to do together to try to influence the Highways Authority. They have come to one of our scrutiny meetings to describe what their next plans are with the A14. I haven't seen any of that happen yet, but I know that they have different plans on how they will plant along that route. But that only happened because we consistently asked them the question again and again, attempting to influence that way. But it's just our voice, so if we can add all of our voices to that, that really helps. The second question is about Future Parks, which was rebranded, and then after the rebrand, sadly, does not exist anymore. But I guess my answer to that would be, I think we've proved a concept here, and I would really love it if we didn't attempt to reinvent the wheel in all of our other local authorities. And so we're going to have a budget discussion later, but there is the possibility of, is there a way we can take this and teach officers at other authorities how we did it, or in fact, use the officers we already have to lead that work in other authorities. So rather than the Combined Authority being the place where that work has to happen, the Combined Authority recognizing a project that works and then funding it to be spread out to the rest. And I think when we initially made the budget bid years ago for this project, that was the idea. Can we prove a concept and then roll it out to our peers? And I think that's probably where the power lies in this organization.
Yes, please do come back.
So that's really reassuring. A bit sad to hear about the rebrand that didn't quite work, but the idea that maybe by demonstrating what you've done locally, the idea, I would absolutely support that. And it's just one final suggestion about your ask of the committee. I'm aware that there has been lobbying both from HDC, County Council, but I think it would be a very strong message if as a chair and as a committee, we kind of also added our voice to the narrative about the expectation that we do see a delivery on what was promised in terms of the A14, in terms of its kind of biodiversity and, and the double in nature thing. So if we could write to them and just keep up that additional pressure, that would be something I would like to suggest. But
thank you. We'll take that away as an action. I think the next stage of the conversation on this, so I have got Councillor Dupre coming in, is that how do we make sure that your work doesn't happen in isolation, because it is an exemplar. I do hope you will enter it for national awards, because I'm pretty sure it'll win. But do we support you to create a resource pack, or do we do that and also find a way by which, you know, the expert team you've got actually goes out and about and supports this and instigates this in other authorities, quite likely wider than the combined authority area. So I think that's the next conversation we need to have. Yes, probably not today, but you know, I think that we need to have that as an action for ASAP, certainly before we set our budget. Lorna.
I was just very quickly going to comment about the A14 and the role of national highways in that rather than the county council. And I think engaging with organisations like National Highways on these matters is a whole other level of difficult.
Yes, and we'll be having the same conversation on the 428 that's now becoming the 421 and on East West Rail, who, when I met with them some years ago, promised me 20% net gain on that. You know, it's the same. Mr. Gallagher is still there, still in the room. So, you know, hopefully we can remind them of those conversations that I had on East West Rail. Lara, I've obviously stimulated you to say some more.
So I'll take my presenter hat off, and as a committee member, I guess I would propose that maybe this committee might like to ask Highways to come and present to us on what are their plans on, let's say A14 in particular. That might give us the topic we would like them to come and update us on.
Yes, and I think probably East West Rail as well, actually. So, yeah. Okay, because I suspect their engagement is mainly with the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, but actually, you know, it's every bit as important they engage with us. Okay, got that? Okay, if there aren't any more, shall we just take a 10-minute comfort break, because we've got quite a long lot to go, and come back here at 25 to ready to go. Okay, thank you. Are we back live? All good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that 10-minute break. It was welcome. Right, we're moving on to agenda item 8 now, which is the Climate Action Plan review, which I think is going to be quite a long one. So Judith, you're leading on this, I think. Thank you.
Ask Adrian to...
Yep, that's fine.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a report of 3 parts, I think, in front of you, and I'll go through those, and I'm happy to stop if you want me to as I get through each
Thank you.
section. So in front of you, the report, we've set out the proposed revisions to the Climate Action Plan to take us through to March 2025. As you'll recall, we have agreed that we'll do a full evidence-based review to then take it on to 2028 later in this year. The report also includes a discussion around the climate criteria that we would apply in terms of developing the climate programme budget spend for you to consider at the next meeting. And so that was some broad principles we discussed previously and we've tested out with the Climate Partnership around helping to shape what sorts of projects or programmes you would feel the climate programme ought to be supporting going forward. And then finally, there is a 2 requests to support continued revenue spend to a couple of key partner organisations that we have been funding and work closely with in terms of Natural Cambridgeshire and Future Fens. Just to go through those in turn, on the refresh, you have an appendix with the rationale for change. So in looking at the changes to the Climate Action Plan, it was very much about bringing it up to date rather than substantial review, as we said, for those reasons that we want to do the evidence base. It takes out some actions that have been completed. It does change the milestones for some where we haven't made the progress that we had anticipated, to take that through to sensibly say the end of March 2025. And also where there's been significant change within the Combined Authorities corporate plan that would drive some of the actions. So we took the opportunity to tweak those. We also have included a bit more clarity around who is intended to lead on an action and whether it's more of a delivery type action or a enabling convening role. We have discussed this through the Climate Partnership, which, as you recall, is the multi-sector body chaired by the Mayor, to get their feedback, and they were supportive of the comments and the changes we've made. I think coming out of that discussion, there was a very strong theme around the water agenda, which we've already mentioned previously today, and that challenge around, are we engaging on the comms side? So those are actions in there that we'll be taking forward. I'm happy to pause there, or I can just talk about the prioritisation of the budget if you wish.
Let's just pause there for a moment for any comments and questions. Lara.
Some of the updated strategic actions do not have a date included. I feel like that might make it difficult to measure progress going forward. I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit more about that. And then also on WS2, it says the engagement plan has been agreed, and that these suggestions had been through the partnership. Listening to our public question from the start of the meeting, I know that question is from a member body of the partnership, questioning some of our engagement plans and questioning some of the actions here. Does that public question lead you to any different changes that you would make to this appendix since it was published? It sounds like they would like to see more action and energy and influence happening in the, especially the engagement sphere.
Yes, thank you. So I'll deal with the latter point first. So the action that's been suggested to change in WS2 is to refresh the engagement plan and delivery during this year. So I think that was attempting to pick up that point that although we had an engagement plan agreed, the actual delivery perhaps wasn't meeting the needs as been identified through the question and the partnership. So we certainly could have perhaps expressed it slightly stronger in the revised action, but the intention behind that is that we will up the pace on the engagement and delivery during 2024, and that's one of the things that we'll be looking at, the additional revenue funding that we've got in the climate programme to do. On the others, some don't have dates because some are dependent very much on other things happening in the policy sphere. So on the carbon credits, for example, there's an action which is very much monitoring what's going on because we're looking at developments. Similarly, we've had discussions in the waste work stream that we were very reliant on national government waste policy being clarified, which kept getting put back. So there are some without dates for that reason. Otherwise, this is a plan that runs to March 2025. So the implication is that we'd be delivering to that timetable if it doesn't specify it.
Thank you. I mean, I think we need to be realistic about what we as an organisation have the capacity to deliver on, and what in this list we could be passporting down to others, or involving others more in order to accelerate delivery, to respond to the question we had at the beginning of the meeting. So I am going to open up conversation now about WS2 and the community grants scheme, which we didn't manage to deliver on last year because of capacity issues, and now which is we're talking about 2025 here. I really feel that we could really speed this up by passporting the funds down to our partner councils, who are, I think, probably all giving out environmental grants. I might be wrong, but certainly the majority are already, have environmental grants projects which they could build on. And if they don't, then any one of those councils that does have such schemes, I mean, mine's called Zero Carbon Communities, I'm sure would support those partner councils in order to manage their own schemes. I really question why we are doing this when we're going to have to be setting it all up from scratch, whereas we have councils who already have these sorts of programmes well established, and it just means adding to the pot, setting out clearly what what sort of things they're going to fund and what they're not going to fund, and then just allow us to get on with it. And quite honestly, I think most of us could get this money out of the door, well, this year, without a doubt. I don't know if I'd just like to open up a conversation about that. Lara, to start.
Yes, I think if we look at the updated strategic action wording, I would feel more comfortable if it said something along the lines of contact all of our constituent councils, ask if any of them are interested in being the delivery body for this because of their existing experience or capacity, rather than keeping this project within the combined authority. And like you said, I think then we could be much more likely to meet this 2025 deadline of spending it on something that is very worthy, but with bodies that are much closer to the villages, if that's really where we want it to get to.
So, Lara, are you suggesting that we ask an authority to become the accountable body, or are you suggesting that we split up the money? We'd have to decide how we split it up, and that everybody takes on responsibility for their own allocation, or are you suggesting that one authority steps up, or perhaps two authorities step up to be the accountable bodies doing the work on behalf of everybody? Either.
I don't have an answer to that
Okay,
yet.
fine.
I mean,
all right. So either model might work.
I think there is wisdom in having one, so we don't duplicate efforts, time, and the expense. and also then that one becomes an expert that can help others in the future.
Point well made. Judith, would you like to see if that's viable?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for that discussion. As you'll appreciate, having joined the sort of authority in the last sort of 2 months or so, there's a lot to review and to understand. And I think this meeting has been particularly helpful in considering, firstly, what the right level is for certain interventions. And we've heard, obviously, from Helen and Lara this morning about that. Also about the importance of impact and joining things up locally with communities, and also how getting the right team in place is critical to enabling spend. So I think we've got a real opportunity here as we're looking how we spend this money on the Net Zero Villages investment programme, that we can look at this absolutely taking the advice that you've given this morning and thinking about how quickly can we actually move to delivery. And I think we should absolutely take that spirit into the next part of the discussion, which Adrian will be guiding us through, about how we look at the wider MTFP programme. So I think that's been really helpful to informing us to take this funding to make the greatest impact forward.
Thank you. I've got Mike first, and then I'll come to Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, it's a question really of what works best, isn't it? Whether we can deliver overall, whether it's, as you say, passporting through to other authorities, constituent authorities, and so on. And reading this, if I was a member of the public reading this, I mean, it is rather wordy. There's a lot about process and putting policy and plans into place. But what would be really helpful if I was looking in from the outside as a member of the public is actually having perhaps a list of what, because we have delivered some projects already, thinking of the zebra buses, but there have been other things as well, and what's in the pipeline, and perhaps putting some really specific things that people can relate to, because there isn't really anything that that I think that people can relate to in this document, but I'm sure that can be done, and we don't need a huge amount, but enough to show what progress in a practical way is actually happening out there, however it might be delivered and what is the best way of delivering. And that's what really comes across from this. But anyway, that's just some general thoughts, really.
Thank you very much. Martin.
I was just listening to everything here. We are the policymakers as councillors, and we set our own plans and everything. But we set it for the officers to carry out them plans for us. Do the officers ever meet the environmental officers under the head of, say, the combined authority to see which action plans are going forward?
Thank you. I think we do, but Judith will...
Yes, there's a place directors group which meets monthly to 6 weekly. I've attended one so far, and a wide range of activities are discussed there, including, for instance, the locally determined contributions that we were speaking earlier. But absolutely, I think it's a really helpful point to make, to think about how we think about using that to have some of this discussion to follow up, and how we make the plans happen through using our constituent authorities. So I can take that away as an action.
That does, please come back.
Yes, thank you very much for that. But it's also a good thing to take best practice from, because we're not all experts in our own departments, and take best practice from other people.
Absolutely. No, good point. Lara.
Going back to the specific Net Zero Villages item, I think we already have an action on energy team at the County Council who are working on retrofit across our region, and that we might want to see whether that might be the pool of resource that's already been built up that could be the delivery agency for something like this. So it could be one of our constituent authorities, or it could be one that already has some of that skilled team in it.
Okay. So I think we need to be careful that it doesn't, this money, which is, quite specific, doesn't get subsumed into something else, because this is meant to be small grants for, even diddy little villages of 50 houses to do something, really exciting. So I think if we can, so I think another reason for us, seeing if any of the member constituents want to be, would like to be the accountable body, is that I think as a combined authority, we will have to resource up to manage grants. And I've chaired all sorts of committees giving out European money, and it's, it takes quite a big officer base. It's really, tricky stuff. Certainly I know at South Cams we're already resourced up to do it. I think you are in Huntingdonshire as well. I suspect it'd be a lot cheaper. Far less money will go out on the administration of these grants, possibly by using this different delivery model, than actually having to resource up. Because what we don't want is 30% of the money to be spent on the management and the coordination of it, when actually, again, when I used to chair a local action group giving out what was LEADER funding, European Rural Development funding, and I think we had to keep the costs at under 10%, and it was really tricky to do it. And I think there's a risk that we'll end up going over and beyond that. So again, I think we need to be stating that a maximum of 10% goes on administrative costs. So I think I just need to check: can we at this committee decide that we will write out to the partner councils to see if anybody would take on accountable body responsibility for this without escalating it to board level, which will just slow the whole process down again? Anybody got an answer to that one? You take it away. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so if possible, I think we are agreeing, yes, that we will write to the partner councils to see if there's any interest in this in order to accelerate delivery of this programme. And if we don't get anything from that, then I think we need to have a further discussion about splitting the money up and passporting it down to the different partners. Mayor, does this sound acceptable to you? Because it's quite a dramatic change in how we do things. But bearing in mind that the combined authority is a commissioning procurement body, it's not meant to be a delivery body.
Yeah, in principle, I'm listening in, and I'm sure officers will maybe want to advise me in case of I'm not seeing the bigger picture here. But on paper, if it helps drive down administration costs, it's a win. If it's part of what we are, a combined authority, the demonstration of being able to work collaboratively on these projects. I mean, the example, as exemplified by, we set up a budget and you came to us and with regard to the biodiversity for all. So it all sounds, in keeping with what we should be doing. I guess a lot of work was done by the Independent Climate Commission in setting a lot of goals and a lot of challenges, which we're not going to, despite, you asked about timelines, obviously not all of them will be fixed by 2025, if only. But I think my worry would be having set a kind of collaborative narrative through the Independent Climate Commission and knowing how, when it was initially brought to the board, how there was pushback from individual councils at the time. I'm not entirely convinced that the messaging that we are trying to do centrally would then actually be delivered locally, because people would then take the ambitions as they see them in their own way. Now, I don't know how we get through that, because that's exactly what central government sometimes gets worried about, that what are combined authorities doing. So on principle, it sounds good. I think I would need reassurance, and I no doubt the officers of the combined authority, is that having gone to great lengths to get a kind of narrative of this is what it is, then if you then hand over the delivery, that it's actually what we were envisaging in an initial project.
So I think that's an argument in favour of having a single body responsible for it, because it will keep everybody's toes to the fire, I think. Lara?
Oh, sorry.
Mayor, I think perhaps your fears could be allayed in the funding agreement. So if we have one constituent body that's willing to take on the work, this committee and you and the board can define what it is we want them to deliver, and that can match the ambitions that were in the Climate Commission's, what they've asked us to do.
Yeah, please do.
As I say, I can see Judith there nodding, and that seems something of a sense. So I would go. And obviously, if once it's set up, the expectation would be it would be watertight in terms of ongoing expectations as well. It's not something that's going to be open to immediate change. Going back to the whole thing of political changes happen. That's what we all accept. That's democracy. But the idea that we embed something that is longer lasting and is over decades rather than a 4-year cycle.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is about community allowing communities to do what is best for them to drive down their carbon emissions and improve their natural capital assets. Yeah. Okay. In a nutshell. Okay. So that's a firm recommendation. Everyone in agreement? Good, thank you very much. Nods all round. Shall we go back to the original paper where there's some other things to agree? So, right, we've got to agree the revisions on the Climate Action Plan. Is there any more debate about the revisions, Lara?
I'm looking at WS7 on nature, and we have some actions around biodiversity net gain. I'm not clear on how strong our role as a combined authority needs to be there, given that we have planning authorities, and perhaps they need some guidance or encouragement. But to set ourselves in action to have an effective BNG system for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, I'm not sure how we would have control over that.
So the Oxford-Cambridge Partnership is refreshing the environmental principles for the partnership, which I think is, we adopted it in its original iteration. I think I hope we adopt the revised ones. I think that will be quite helpful in embedding real ambition within the work we do. So I hope that will be helpful. Judith, sorry, Adrian, yes, please come in.
So I think part of this is already happened. So we did call together all the local authorities so that they could share experience in preparing for BNG, and that led to some discussions about sharing officers and different arrangements emerged out of that. I think the action is to have an effective system which is not just planning authorities, although that's obviously how the system will operate in terms of getting permissions, but it's about then supporting landowners to bring forward good schemes locally that can offer BNG credits for those off-site requirements that are needed. So it's about, I think, adding some extra value onto the system because it could be the case, depending on how it's set up, that developers will look outside of our area where they need to satisfy those credits. So it was a bit more encompassing, and I know that we have been working with Natural Cambridgeshire, who have been taking that action around identifying good locations in the area that could deliver BNG. So I think it's not setting out that combined authority would run the system, but I think it's about collaborative working across the system.
Are you happy with that? Okay. Right. Yes, Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to sort of pass a note on, particularly from officers in our climate change team at Peterborough. They've just mentioned to me that they've helped update the Climate Action Plan and intend to help develop the upcoming plan for 2025 to 28. I've already talked to officers actually in my climate change team about potential projects that are coming from Peterborough, the extension of our school programmes, some money around our BID, our central business area where we can support businesses to move towards net zero, and we support the provision for 9 million capital and 2 million revenue over the next 4 years. But what I've got from my officers is that we've had a meeting about what things we're doing in Peterborough and how we could feed into these projects. And they felt that the Combined Authority needs to more fully define the criteria for awarding the funding so that they know what projects can be allowed to be developed in line with that. So I just thought I'd pass those reflections on to you. Thanks.
Yeah. Judith?
Yes, thank you. I mean, it's good to hear that your team feel engaged in the process and also acknowledge that there's more work to be done. We very much acknowledge that there is more work to be done as well. So we're bringing the proposals for the outlined strategic overview of the funding programme to this meeting today, very much with a view to getting your views on that so that we can then go away and revise and prepare more detailed proposals to come to this meeting in June. So the work Adrian has engaged and spoken to a lot of people, and indeed had a workshop about a month ago to explore some of the content of these proposals that we're bringing today. But it is very much a snapshot in time, and by June I would hope that we are absolutely bringing to you a set of more robust and detailed criteria.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so let me just go back to the right paper here. So, I mean, obviously, so on recommendation A, that's obviously going to be an ongoing discussion. B is to comment on the proposed approach to developing the capital and revenue climate programme as agreed in the MTFP. We haven't really touched on. Yes, please, Adrian. Thank you. Yeah, we stopped, didn't we, before you got to that bit? My apologies.
Yes, Chair. So this is the second part. So this is sort of paragraphs 311 and 312 particularly. So as Judith has just outlined, we have been having discussions to help shape the climate programme going forward, and we've suggested some core criteria and been debating those through the various support groups. So in terms of the sort of overall strategic point, obviously we do have the Climate Action Plan with actions in it, which help define what we want to do, but also we've identified some other criteria that would help, I guess, narrow down or focus people's attention in. So one is around, does it appear in other partners' climate strategy and action plans as priorities? So there's sort of that alignment point we've mentioned. A challenging one, which does it not replace other mainstream funding or responsibilities? And there's always a bit of a grey area there where we want to do some sort of key things, but it's about us as a combined authority leading action and innovative work rather than being a stopgap where people aren't able to fund it locally through their normal responsibilities. And then a number of things that I think we've already touched on in the debate today. So we've talked about the example of the Hunts biodiversity as being a demonstrator and how we replicate that in other authorities where they feel that's appropriate, but also can be scaled up. So if a project comes in, it can be scaled up rather than the challenge about replicating it is the Hunt's example, that was £1.3 million investment. And so it's actually to stimulate others coming forward with their investment on the basis of the success of it, rather than the combined authority having to find 1.3 million each time to move it around the authorities. Obviously, to look at the benefits to cutting carbon emissions. So, we do need to be tackling and demonstrating that process. Equally, we've put in tangible adaptation benefits, which basically means taking into account the climate risks that are becoming realities and what we're doing about it. Whether there are nature-based solutions, so trying to work with our environment rather than necessarily have to develop and build hard infrastructure. And one that was debated through the Climate Partnership was around unlocking significant additional funding. And it's not always appropriate that projects would do that, but a number of our climate projects essentially have led to major investment. And I think we've had the discussion about the ability for the area to have projects developed, because there are numerous pots of funding that come and go at short notice nationally and through other stakeholders, that we're trying to build a pipeline of projects for. So those were the broad criteria that we're going to suggest drive the climate programme for the £9 million capital and £2 million revenue, based on the conversations of other things that have come up already today.
Thank you very much. And I think, I'd certainly rather see us do fewer things really well than lots of things not very well. So, I think we will be refining, what we're involved with in order to, be able to resource things properly. But to, adapt, going back to the challenge we had about ambition, but we can't boil the ocean. Actually, climate change is doing that. But, Lara.
I'm very supportive of the criteria you've set out here. I suppose my question is about timing. So if officers come back to this committee in June with their suggested capital spending and revenue spending, that's already 1 quarter into the financial year and leaves very little room for our voices to have influence in that conversation. So perhaps it might be appropriate to have a less formal conversation with the constituent members before we get to that decision of, are these the right things 1 quarter into the financial year? And I think maybe that reflects some of what the Peterborough officers are saying.
Adrian.
Yes, very good suggestion. We have a new process emerging in terms of how the authority assesses its projects through the assurance framework. But we're going to use some of those templates, which includes, there's a project concept template, which is a very short sort of set out your idea type approach, expression of interest, which we will use in an informal way to build that up as an initial, ahead of the actual formal implementation of the new scheme coming forward. So we're a bit of a trial of that, but yeah, we will do that based on these criteria, and that project form will give us an idea of what people actually want to suggest.
Yes, Laura?
So it's March now. What would be the timeline on our officers receiving that form and returning that form?
So I think we have drafts of the template, so it can be, once we've had approval today of this report, if that's where the recommendation goes, then we will very soon push that out. I think I need a conversation with Judith on what an appropriate return date might be to fit with reporting cycles to June.
Thank you. Over to you, Judith.
Yeah, so I think one of there's a couple of factors that I was just going to sort of highlight as part of that discussion and the work that Adrian and I will do over the coming months on that. So in any kind of programme design, there's a balance to be had between what the strategic framework we're setting and what we're seeking to do, and the applicants applying for money and what they're seeking to do, and where they meet in the middle. And I think particularly taking the chair's point about doing fewer things well, we might well want to refine that and think carefully about what we're doing in year 1, year 2, year 3, in order to focus on delivering fewer things well. I think the other thing we need to consider is the amount of capital there is in this, and just how challenging it can be to spend capital. If there's any planning required, that immediately takes you into a very long timescale. So I think it's also very important to reflect on that capital nature of the funds, and whether in fact we're doing fewer capital grants, in which case they will be larger and will take longer, or whether we're having a programme of smaller capital grants that many people can then participate in. And we then define the strategic purpose of the programme here, and the projects can happen at a different place. I think there's a lot of the structure of the programme we need to think through, and Adrian and I will take that forward, Chair.
Super. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so moving on. Recommendation C. Oh, sorry, Adrian. Do you want to say? Oh, sorry, Mayor. Apologies.
I'm on green now. I want to say thank you. Obviously, the fact that so much conversation's been made around it does sound like constituent authorities want to be part of it, and I obviously appreciate governance is an important issue. I think one thing I have previously raised, actually at the business board level, I know there's no business board reps here to know that, I think it would be important as we roll out projects. The most important thing is the idea that it's done in collaboration. And there are simple ways that we can be demonstrating that, which I don't think the Combined Authority has done in the past. Simply, a bit like using the, dare I say it, the blue flag and gold stars of the European Union. If there was ever any project that was ever delivered, there used to be a plaque up along with whoever opened it, and saying this was funded in conjunction with the Combined Authority. I know I've asked about that before. I know Al Kingsley at business board level has said that before, and I just want to kind of put it on a matter of record again, Judith, to go back to whoever we need to do within our own organisation to make sure that as projects are delivered, the joint collaborative working is recognised, and if it is a little bit of sustainable plastic or whatever, but at least we recognise how this has been rolled out.
Thank you. Yes, it's obvious. So in my previous life as a sort of fundraiser and project manager, I've personally screwed in plaques on all sorts of things, for Wren and Leader and goodness knows what. So no, it's important to do. It's important that we get the message out to people that it's our interventions. Lara and then Martin, please.
That makes me reflect back on WS2 in our action plan, where we're asking the Combined Authorities public relations team to think about how do we have shared policy positions. This has been in the action plan since the start. I don't think we've ever heard any feedback at this committee or others on what has happened in that sphere, what progress has happened on that. So using the public affairs team at CPCA to drive shared policy positions, because I think that's really where the collaboration could be really successful.
Adrian?
Yeah, so I guess we haven't formally brought it back to this committee, but there has been some notable examples. For example, the work around the Ely Junction campaign, and we've heard that the reshape of the corporate communications team has identified a number of specific campaigns. So I think you'll see more visibility reporting. There's been a lot done on shared work with our across our authorities, but we haven't had that platform, I guess, to bring it back in the way that we will do going forward.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Chair. My point was over time. Normally we have a meeting every other month. Why are we missing out May and coming in June instead?
So we're going to have a conversation about that at the end, all right? About whether we need to.
But I'm thinking of the timing.
Yes,
Lara
yes.
saying the timing for the budget and everything.
So Adrian and Jude have got a kind of list there of things we've been asking for during this meeting, presentations and so on. So I've suggested that they go away and have a discussion about that and bring us back in June, because which I think we probably will do, won't we? Yeah, it's a good point. We don't want to lose the impetus, but it's we can also bring this stuff back as well. So are you okay with that? Yep. Okay, fine. Righty-ho. So moving on to C, to agree £50,000 in 24-25 and 120,000 in 25-26 for the budget allocation for Natural Cambridgeshire, and to delegate authority to Judith to consider and approve a revision to the existing grant funding agreement. Now, I worked hard on getting initial support for Natural Cambridgeshire, because I view them very much as a delivery arm for us. They're doing really important work. If we under-resource them, then they won't do that work for us, and it'll have to come back to us. So my only question is this enough? Thank you, Adrian.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If I was speaking for Natural Cambridgeshire, then I think they could put out a strong case for doing a lot more work with more money, as many organisations would. I think this represents an uplift on our support, which I think will just enable them to strengthen their capacity. And as you said, I won't say more about the organisation because they presented it last committee, but obviously we're strongly behind. It's just in terms of the numbers, just to be clear, there is 70,000 in financial year 24-25 already agreed with their contract. So that there's an additional 50 to make it 120 in each of the next 2 years. That's why the figures are presented that way.
No, I understand that. Good. And I, back when I started doing this, they were an organisation with only volunteers and no budget at all. So I hope we're all in agreement with that. And then moving on to the last recommendation, which is 60,000 in 24-25 and 25-26 for Fenland soil, which I know virtually nothing about. So I'm just going to, yes, Mayor.
I have the benefit of being visited Fenland soil many times, and I can only say that I know that the work that they've done and shown myself and the work they've done out in the Fenland is one that I've been very supportive of along the way. Possibly officers should introduce it in a bit more detail, but I am supportive of it. So.
No, and I mean, I think we're all very well aware of the environmental catastrophe that will result from all the peat drying out, and I presume this is exactly the work that they're doing on wetland farming and so on, isn't it?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so Fenland Soil bring together the farming industry, academics, and some of the environmental agencies looking at issues around the fens, particularly the peat soils, which they've got about 5 work streams, one of which is a monitoring of emissions, which we've explored before, which is subject to controversy as to how much is coming out of our fields. And so there are a number of monitoring stations that have been funded, and some very high-level science going on, which we just get the results from explained to us. But but as part of other work streams include actually helping farmers adapt and trial different things. So they recently were very successful in drawing down a paludiculture trial, which is basically wet farming. And I think they've already drawn down about £1 million worth of projects to our area on the basis of them being able to put the case. And I think that's back to our conversation before about building capacity. So we're getting incredible value for money if you just want to look at it through that lens from that organisation existing.
Yes, paludiculture, that's my new word for this week. Lara, and then Lorna.
I'm very happy to support the recommendation, but I'd also like to ask Fenland Soil to come to the committee and tell us about what they've done so far and what they will do with that funding, just as Natural Cambridgeshire did a few months ago.
Another presentation, jolly good. We love a presentation. Lorna.
I'd love a presentation from Fenland Soil. I was at their 2-day conference in April last year in the Maltings in Ely, which was absolutely excellent. Brilliant. And they have the capacity to bring together not only national but international experts to give the benefit of their advice and experience. It was a really impressive day, and the 2 days. And the other thing that is really impressive is their active engagement with the farming community, the people who actually manage this land. And I think they have instilled a lot of confidence from the farmers in their good intentions and their actual ability to bring people together around these difficult issues and to actually achieve things. So fully in support of this, and I'd love us to hear from them.
Brilliant, thank you. Now we're going to have to crack on because the Mayor and I have to take part at 1 o'clock in an independent improvement board meeting. Well, have you got 12:30? God, I hope not. I've got 1 o'clock in my diary. Okay, perhaps somebody would like to check that out. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay. It's in Peterborough. We're not going to Peterborough. Okay, so we've got the recommendations. I'm happy to propose them. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Lara. Do we need to take a vote, or is it consensual? Jolly good. All right, thank you very much. Okay. Do you want a hand raise? Hand raised, please. Those approving them. Well, just stick your hand up anyway.
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify, and that's with the amendment to the first
That's
one.
with the amendment, yes,
First
please.
one, yeah.
Thank you very much. Good. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Oh, we're missing lunch. Well, gosh. Well, yeah. So we'll just think of them all having their lunch. Right. Okay, right. So we are moving on to care home retrofit programme update. Yep, fine. Thank you. Judith first.
Thank you, Chair. So the care home retrofit programme, we've brought the paper to the meeting today. Adrian is going to say a few words of introduction. We've also got Martin, who can provide more detail on the latest projects that are going through, and I know one of those is with me to review this week. For clarity, I just wanted, Chair, to suggest that we might want to be clearer in our recommendation. At the moment, it says to approve the care homes retrofit programme. Delivery continues to December 2025. But certainly the content of the paper would actually suggest a better written recommendation would be to approve the care homes retrofit programme. Delivery continues to December 2025, but will be reviewed with the committee in June 2024 as part of the wider funding discussion that we've alluded to earlier. But I'm obviously very happy to take the comments through the chair and of other committee members, but perhaps it would be timely, Chair, for Adrian to say a few words of introduction.
Thank you. Adrian, over to you first.
Yes, thank you. So the committee discussed this before and asked it to come back, and basically we looked at what the programme could do in terms of whether it's likely to fully spend out, which, you know, I think the clear recommendation is that it's not going to. However, we didn't want to disrupt the current delivery for those who are progressing through, and there is a number of care homes that we are working with to bring the projects through. And although we've put some options for the programme in there, basically because we're going to have a combined climate programme budget discussion in June, it made sense to review where we were then with the underspend, and it would be an easier way of you deciding what to do with that underspend if it came as a combined report. So there's plenty in there about different ways of taking the programme forward, but the current recommendation is just to enable us to work through as we are with that review with the amended wording that Judith suggested.
Fine. So we've got under 300,000 likely to be spent out of a grant of 2 million. I presume we're now closed for applications. We're not accepting any more applications, I assume.
We of those expressed an interest, we gave a deadline to respond to. So in that sense, we're not actively searching. Although there was a conversation with the member from Peterborough previously on the committee who was looking at opportunities within Peterborough, although none have arisen from that.
But I mean, we've had yonks on this, so I wouldn't be supportive of accepting any more applications at this stage of the game. I'm personally not happy about so much money being tied up with no hope of spending it. But as you've said to me offline, now might not be the best meeting for this. It's when we're actually, discussing the budget in June is probably the right time to make the decision to reallocate that money into something else. I mean, again, I think it was a great idea. It just hasn't really worked, and I'd personally be surprised if all of the applicants we've got actually end up delivering. So, sorry, Laura, did you have your hand up first, or can I take Laura first and then Martin? Thank you.
I think I would be uncomfortable in this committee making a decision today that says continue with this 2 million budget until 2025. Given the information about the in 3.6, 285,000 is the indicative grant commitment. Whether it would be possible for us to approve 300,000 until 2025 on this project, and that the remainder then can be added to that conversation we are going to have in June, without any indication now of what it might go to, but that would be part of the conversation.
So that's a recommendation, is it? Okay. Do we have a seconder for that recommendation? Right, Lorna Dupre seconds that recommendation. Thank you. Yes, Adrian.
So we might need to bring Martin in on this, but I wouldn't want to set a figure that precludes any in the current process, although we've got an indicative grant commitment. Obviously, we're working with those applicants on those budgets, so we might just need some wording either to give us the scope to make sure all those that have applied could add up to that. But I do take the intention that we'll be looking to reallocate a large proportion of the budget.
Thank you. I'll just take Martin and then I'll come back to you. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. My point is a good project and well funded. I think the reason why there's not been a great uptake is the smaller companies cannot afford to match the grant. We should be looking at seeing some of these smaller homes are really, really struggling and only just managing to survive. If we told them they had to pay half for the fitting of the house to bring it up to a greater standard, then they would lose profit, and they can't afford to do that and end up closing.
I think there's quite a number of reasons that actually, as a scheme, it's failed, albeit was a good idea. Rob, would you like to just comment on how we've got here and also on the recommendation?
Yes, I just wanted to, that's quite loud, sorry, comment on the recommendation just to reassure the board. The money isn't going to go anywhere if you don't make the decision to cap it at 300,000 today. Martin may well be able to come in and say whether we have any more in train that would take that up. I very, very much approve of the active monitoring of the ongoing programme, though. It's lovely to see. But yes, just to say, if you leave the money there, it's not going to disappear. You can still make the decision with it in June if you don't make a decision to cap it today.
Okay, thank you. I should just, at this point, I should just say officers have put huge effort into this. They've gone way over and beyond what might reasonably expected of them. They've sought out care homes. They could not have done more. Can I make a suggestion, Lara and Lorna, that if by upping upping from 300 to 400,000 and giving Judith delegated decision-making to amend that accordingly, that just removes any sort of element of risk with this?
I'm content with that. Yeah.
Are you happy with that? Okay, so we've got, is Adrian, are you okay with that if we up it to 400,000 cap? I think it's just about making the next decision making easier, because we, rather than having to decide to change this and then what do we do with the money, we've already taken that decision here. So it's an easier decision when we get to June, because we essentially have some allocated funding. It just simplifies the whole thing. Does that work for you? We really don't want to make life more difficult for you.
Yeah, I was just checking with Martin in terms of, because we were having conversations with a number of those that gave us expressions of interest that haven't yet materialised into a full application, but they are obviously in those discussions. So that was my comment about not closing it off. So if there's a higher total of 400,000 with, and I guess if we do have more than that, then there'll be a conversation about how we could unlock
Right.
it.
Okay. So have we captured the recommendation that let's find some words that the care home retrofit programme be capped at £400,000 with delegated decision making given to the executive director, place and connectivity for amending that sum once the full extent of the spend is clear. Does that work? Okay, can I have a show of hands on that, please? Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Okay, right. So does that kind of knocks that one on the head, doesn't it? Okay, right. Good. Thank you very much, everybody. And right, we're now going to the budget item. Is that Judith? Oh, Rob. Back to you, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm substituting in for Tim in my team as he's on annual leave. This is the committee's regular update on the in-year performance of their budgets. And obviously you've talked about a lot of them already today, so I will only talk about those by exception, rather than going over everything twice. I will also be doing it in two halves. I'll briefly talk about those that sit outside the Net Zero Hub that there's already been a fair amount of discussion on, and then talk a bit more about the Net Zero Hub budgets, particularly as there was an action from the previous committee to give a bit more meat on the bones of that. So in terms of the report in front of you, Table 1 is the revenue and Table 2 the capital. Those items down to the local area energy plan in Table 1 and the Net Zero Villages programme in Table 2 are those that sit outside the Net Zero Hub. So those are Part 1. The main behaviour to highlight those, as I'm sure is obvious from the discussion that's had, is the little spend to the end of January on 10 of the projects, in fact 0. The committee have already heard about care homes, biodiversity and the climate action plan, and are looking to have a review of their budgets in the round in June. The other revenue budgets that haven't been discussed in as much detail today were mostly created by decisions by the CA board in September and November due to increased Treasury management loan interest. So there was additional funding available in year, and the board took the opportunity to spend that on delivering higher priority areas within your remit. As such, there hasn't been a huge amount of time between some of those decisions and the end of January to get on with delivering them. They've really been in the initiation and stage of their life cycle. I spoke to officers before the meeting this morning, most of whom are sitting around here, and got some reassurance that spend has started coming through in those in February. So those forecast outturns still look achievable by the end of the year. And it's really just a timing issue where your actuals in this report at the end of January, despite the fact I'm talking to you in March. So there is still some time despite the fact of today's date. The rest of those budget lines then are the Net Zero Hub, and I just wanted to clarify with the committee, the request in your previous agenda, it's been understood as me giving you a bit more information as part of the budget update report. If at the end of that I haven't addressed what you were after and what you really want is a programme update from someone who's leading in the Net Zero Hub, please do say, because we can absolutely get them in. Or indeed, if you just want representation from the hub alongside the other officer reps here, we can again get them as regular attendees. So I'll only talk about those that look a bit off from the Net Zero Hub, but obviously happy to take questions on any of them. The first that looks a bit unusual is the Public Sector Decarbonisation Fund, which has very limited spend so far. And that phase 3 of that opened in October. It's there to allow public sector organisations to bid for funding to retrofit their accommodation and other buildings in the public domain. As you can see, money is now coming through on that. And it's a ring-fence grant that is available in 24-25, so any underspend on that budget will be rolled forward into the next financial year. Similarly to that, the Local Energy Advice Demonstrator, or LEAD, that really wound up during the current financial year. There's now 6 pilot areas that have been identified and are in place, delivering the contractors there. And these are providing support and advice to members of the public who are looking to do their own retrofit, rather than the projects we'll come to later where they're delivered by and paid for by us. Again, that's now in place and spend is coming through, and we're expecting that forecast to be maintained through to the end of the year. And again, it can be carried forward into next financial year. There's no funding risk at the end of March on that one. So those are the smaller numbers, shall we say. The big numbers in the Net Zero Hub, as I'm sure everyone's aware, is around the domestic retrofit programs that government has devolved out to the Net Zero Hubs across the country. That started with LAD2. Just in case anyone's not aware, LAD just stands for Local Authority Delivery. It's extremely generically titled. LAD2 and LAD3 and HUG1, which is the Home Upgrade Grant, have all completed. You've got numbers in front of you for LAD3 and HUG1. That's because we're still going through final claims from the deliverers and the audit is ongoing. At the end of that audit, any unspent funding will be returned to the Department for Net Zero. So those forecast outturns are actually anticipating a degree. I think the majority of it is expected to be going through to suppliers with their final invoices, but there's, I think, around £900,000 currently that we're expecting to give back to DESNZ anticipated in that forecast. What is still ongoing is HUG2, and that's where the really large numbers are still sitting. It's the successor scheme to HUG1, but DESNZ decided to change some of the terms and conditions between HUG1 and HUG2, and that led to quite significant delay both locally and seen across the country in getting into contract with providers to deliver these retrofit interventions. And that has lost sort of 9 months of the programme in the current financial year. We've been very upfront with DESNZ about this. We've been in conversations with them nationally. Some of you may remember that someone probably said a very similar thing to you about the LAD2 programme when we took that on. The big difference here is in that one, we were sort of the first authority to say we're not going to deliver to profile, and we got a very large amount of scrutiny off the back of that. We made the case that it was just timing. Everyone else would follow suit a few months down the line, which did indeed come to pass. But there was a lot of focus on us as being the first ones to admit to that. This is very much not the case with this one. DESNZ, in their wisdom, in fact, have not given all the money up front for this programme in the same way they did for LAD2. And so to get the money out of them, you have to tell them, we've got these 5 houses in this tranche. Are you happy with us delivering it? And because of that new process, DESNZ are now cited on the speed of delivery everywhere across the country because they know how many proposals they've had in and how much money they've released. So they can see that this is a national problem, that it's not local to the Combined Authorities Net Zero Hub. But that doesn't stop the fact of that loss for 6 to 9 months. So they are in discussions with our Net Zero Hub and nationally about what's going to happen with that underspend. We've got a change request in with them at the moment, which proposes that the vast majority of that money is allowed to be spent in the next financial year. And we've been working this year to increase the capacity and the pipeline capability to enable greater delivery next year. Whether it's still realistic to deliver 100% of the fund, a 2-year programme in a little over a year, probably not, but we will obviously do our best, as will the rest of the country, and we will be putting it to whichever government's in power in a year's time as to how to use that funding that isn't spent against that programme. The forecast you've got in front of you that 22 million will be spent by the end of the year, I would say that is very optimistic, but it did reflect the discussions we were having with DESNZ at the time that this forecast was put together. As I say, we've got a change request with them now, and the anticipated spend is closer to, say, £1.5 million by the end of this year, with the vast majority being rolled into next. As I say, more than happy to take any questions. If I can't answer them, I can absolutely get people from the Net Zero Hub to come to your future committee meetings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, and I get briefings from them, and it is incredibly complicated. And and a perfect example of how not to run a grant scheme, but I'm directing that at government, not at the hub. Martin.
Thank you, Chair. It was me and myself who brought up the questions at the last meeting. The reason being is that the figures in the column originally, it came up in 3.3 on the last meeting. Forecast outturn is expected for Net Zero Hub is expected an underspend, yet everything in the columns showed an overspend of 2.35 million. And I asked, where's the underspend when the figures in the columns didn't show, but the new figures that 3.3 forecast outturn is expected to be in line with budget, so it's changed. So my question is, what's changed?
Apologies, I will have to review that and come back to you. Sorry, I will provide a written response to you outside of the committee if that's suitable.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Yes, Mike.
Just to say, I mean, having the option of slippage and deferring to the next financial year is really important, but of course, it does add a lot of pressure when you back end big projects that are going on, and as you say, then there's always the concern, will it actually meet what you're aiming to do?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, anything else? No. Okay, so I think we're asked to note this, aren't we? Roger, just asked to note. Okay, thank you. So we note it. And moving swiftly on, item 11 is about the future agenda plan for us. Thank you very much, Rob. That was great. Do you just want? I mean, have we really covered this? We've said we've got a list of things. We probably will have a meeting in June, which kind of suggests you get in the diary pretty quickly, because my diary is a thing of horror, as I'm sure most other people's are. And we've got various suggestions for. Oh right, Wednesday the 19th of June. We've got penciled in here. Okay. And we've got quite a long list now of presentations. I think because we won't be able to stay here all day, we'll need to prioritise those. Lara?
Councillor Goodall suggested that we might consider a May meeting. I think that was. There's so many items here that I have made a note of. I'm wondering if it's possible for us to have an extra meeting.
Can I leave that with officers to kind of review the work plan? And Joanna, do you want to comment?
I was just going to come in and say that it isn't possible to have a formal meeting arranged for May, an additional one. We have got another additional one scheduled, a provisional one scheduled for July, which is an extra one before the normal June and September one. That is in the diary already. That was approved at board.
Okay.
And I think there were plans, Judith, correct me if I'm wrong, to have a briefing, not a formal meeting at the end of this month.
A sort of May briefing, rather.
Or was it? Or was that? Have I got that wrong? Sorry.
I think that might have been the communications workshop, which was actually an internal workshop before we go more widely. I guess we could, if members were interested, set up some informal briefing sessions over the next few months with a view to being able to make more progress in June, but I will perhaps lead that through the chair.
Lorna?
I'm mystified what's stopping us having a meeting in May. We've only been told we can't, not why we can't.
Yes, yes, Joanna?
Apologies. Just because the meeting timetable has been agreed at board, we've also got a PERDA coming through in April. I don't know whether it will be doable to get that into May. I mean, I can take it under advisement.
We can still have a briefing, though, can't we? I mean,
we can have
a formal meeting, but
of
we can still have
course,
something
we can
called
have
a briefing. Well, informal, and we have these informal
sorry.
leaders ones. Lorna?
No, I'm still mystified. The normal cycle is that we have a bi-monthly meeting. PERDA won't apply to anything that we know about beyond the 2nd of May. So there is the 3rd of May onwards to the end of the month for us to hold a May meeting. What was the board's? I'm not a member of the board, so I can't answer this. What was the thinking of the board in saying that we had to wait another month to have a meeting?
So Judith just told me that the issue in May might be around if memberships of councils change and they haven't had their AGM to nominate new people on the committees.
I've looked in for other reasons, I can tell you, and it's very annoying. From another point of view about the issue of maybe nothing will change, but there is a potential challenge if leadership or representation at the combined authority is changed by local election results. Then there may be a suggestion that of gerrymandering, should there be some attempt to get votes through before that is being delivered.
Thank you. That's an explanation I understand.
All right, okay. Lara?
So I've made a list of the items that I hope to see in future agendas. Some of them are not decision-making items. I wonder if we might be able to separate the two, have an informal meeting in May that doesn't require a formal AGM delegation or appointment of officers from our constituent councils. And then when we get to June, we're in a better place to make some of those decisions.
Right, if you'd like to give your list to officers, that'd be marvellous. And if I can just leave it with officers to have a discussion all together about what might be possible. Is that okay? Yep, okay, good with that. Righty-ho. So, date of next meeting, as things stand at the moment, it's 19th of June, but likely to change. All right. Okay, thank you very much indeed, all officers. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you very much, members. Look forward to seeing you sooner rather than later. Goodbye.